Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
And welcome to our study every Sunday on the book Genesis. We're focusing on the second part, which deals with the miracles according to Spiritism. In the last few weeks, we have been diving deeply into the chapter of fluids, which is chapter 14, which is the groundwork, the foundation for us to understand that what was coined miracles, what was called a miracle, namely a supernatural event, manifestation, is actually explainable based on understanding the fluids, the universal cosmic fluid in its many different manifestations throughout the universe. And we've learned right at the beginning that actually the so-called miracles can be all explained. So we're learning the theoretical background to later on go and study what was labeled a miracle that Jesus performed, or many miracles that was said Jesus performed. But thanks to Spiritism and Allan Kardec and the beautiful scientific work that he's compiled, we're now better able to understand that actually what used to be a miracle, what used to be supernatural, or was viewed as supernatural, in reality really isn't. So in the last couple of weeks, we have been studying apparitions and transfiguration, and we also understood better of how healings happen, magnetic healings. And today we're going to dive into physical manifestations and mediumship, which will be the items 40 through 44. And at some point we will actually also pull out the medium's book, which will help us understand how these physical manifestations work, what the mechanisms are. So let us for a moment thank God and Jesus and Allan Kardec and all the mediums who helped Allan Kardec, and Spiritism and Kardec Radio and the mentors for this beautiful opportunity to study, to open up our minds, to enhance our knowledge. And while we do that, we connect with God with gratitude for all the teachings that are available to us. And thank you, God, for opening us up to the teachings that we actually take care, that we take advantage of them. So thank you so much for this moment of study. So let me share the screen. And if you'd like to pull out the Genesis book, you may do that. We will be recapping last week so we can build solidly one piece of information on the next. So we're going to share the screen here. Okay. I'm going to start. Right. Now we're going to just quickly check the technology to make sure that it's working. Yes, it looks perfect. All right, dear friends, let us move forward. So last week and the week before, we touched on healings and what is the mechanism behind the magnetic healings. Those healings that happen sometimes instantaneously, but also over time. The healings where doctors, the medical profession, is not part of. Often these healings are called faith healings, and it's definitely a major ingredient. But we're going over the mechanisms again, just because healings are very important once we understand, once we study Jesus's healings he performed, so that we don't fall into the trap of seeing that it's a miracle. So let us go back now. Let us look at the universal cosmic fluid. The universal cosmic fluid, or divine plasma, is what this universe consists of, and it is condensed in our perispirit. And condensed in the perispirit, it can supply reparatory elements to a body. The driving agent is the discarnate or the incarnate spirit, which injects a portion of its perispirit into the deteriorating or sick body. So the universal cosmic fluid, our perispirit, consists of the universal cosmic fluid in its condensed state. The perispirit is different in all of us. Its density depends on our evolutionary step we find ourselves in. The more evolved we are, the less dense our perispirit is. So the driving agent is either an incarnate spirit or a discarnate spirit, and it injects a portion of its perispirit into this ailing body. In other words, it is the fluid that performs the role of the therapeutic agent. And we're kind of just taking a mental note. This is what happened when Jesus healed, just so that we stay connected to our chapter of miracles. So the healing then is the replacing of unhealthy molecules with healthy ones. The unhealthy molecules are in the diseased body, and the healthy ones come from the perispirit of the either incarnate or discarnate spirit, who focuses its will, the desire, the intention to help, to heal. The curative power of the fluid lies in its purity of the injected substance, which is the fluid. The more pure the perispirit is that gets injected into the deteriorating body, the more potent it is. Combine that with the energy of the will and the intention of the healer, and we have the mechanism of healing. The healer, so-called healer, can be an incarnate or discarnate spirit. So now this magnetic action that we just went over again can happen in three different processes. The first one would be the magnetizer's fluid. Let us say you have the intention to help a diseased body. So it will be your fluid, it will be your perispiritual fluid that will be injected into the body that's ailing. And your perispirit will be more potent the purer it is. And that is called magnetism per se, or human magnetism. Number one. Number two, the fluids of a spirit, a discarnate, acts directly and without intermediary upon an incarnate body. So the fluid of a spirit acts on an incarnate, and that is called spirit magnetism. And again, the potency depends on the quality of the spirit. And the third option is when the fluids, that spirit of a spirit, pours out onto the magnetizer, onto, let's say, an incarnate. So a spirit pours its fluid, its perispirit, into you as the magnetizer, and you as a magnetizer will be the conductor. We experience that with passes all the time. The passes that we practice in spiritist centers. This is then called a mixed or semi-spirit magnetism, or a spirit-human magnetism, according to Allan Kardec. The human and the spiritual fluid, perispiritual fluids, combine. I'm hoping this is all clear. So then we went to apparitions last time, and there we learned that an apparition, the definition of an apparition is as follows. Since the perispirit formed of ethereal matter, the spirit can, through an act of will, cause it, the ethereal matter, to undergo molecular modification. So the will of a spirit will be able to cause molecular modifications to the perispirit, to its perispirit. And as a result of this condensation, this so-called condensation, the perispirit of the spirit who wills it becomes visible, but only momentarily. All these apparitions, so when spirits appear to us, are part of the law of nature, not a miracle. They're not miracles. They're part of the law of nature because why? Because we can explain them. They can be reproduced. They're not supernatural, and it's not just once it happens. No, it happens all the time that we can see, that certain people can see spirits for this reason. The apparition can be vague or clearly defined, and that again depends on the degree of the condensation of the perispirit. So if a spirit wills it to be more dense, then the apparition is more clear. If it's more vaporous, then it is less clearly defined. So a spirit can show itself through this molecular modification. It wills upon its perispirit. The spirits decide who and when they want to show themselves. It's their choice. And within a group, some may see the apparition and others may not. Even though an incarnate can have the ability to see apparitions, yet if the spirit doesn't want to show itself to spirit A, to incarnate spirit A, but to incarnate spirit B, then B will only see it. So this is really interesting. So it's also important that we don't think, oh, she said there is this spirit right there and I can't see it. Well, it's not necessarily because we don't have the ability. It could be that the spirit doesn't want to show itself to us. The spirit side is responsible for seeing spirit. And it's not everyone has this ability, and that the spirit side is from our soul, right? It's not our physical eyes with which we will see apparitions. And then we talked about transfigurations as well. So how do transfigurations differ from apparitions? Well, transfigurations are a type of apparition, but it's different in the sense that it's closer to the body. In apparitions, the spirit can be far away from an incarnate, or the spirit can be far away. It's not linked to the body. But in transfigurations, the spirit can perform transformations within the contours of the perispirit. The spirit can perform transformations within the contours of the perispirit. So in other words, the perispirit radiates all around our bodies, and that's the apparition. And in transfigurations, it can be produced on the surface of the body. So that's the difference. And it's under this fluidic layer is then the real body. So, and then that's covered up. That image is erased, partially or completely, and takes on, so the body takes on the apparition, the transfiguration, causes a different image. And depending on the influence of the spirit who co-creates this transfiguration, we either become more beautiful or horrendous looking. So you and I could be looking differently as a result of a spirit performing an change, a transfiguration of our perispirit. And yes, we're still here in physical form looking the way we look, but our perispirit covers it up, so to speak. Yes. So now let us move on to today's subject. And let me just quickly check whether anyone had a question so far.
Yes.
Let us see here real quick. There is Giacomo Belluomini. Thank you so much for joining, dear friend. And there's Mark Carlos. Thank you for being here. Teresa. Hey, good evening. So nice to see you. There's a few more. Feel free to say hi and also ask questions if you want to. Welcome, dear friends. It's a pleasure to have you. All right, so we're going to page 307 in Genesis. This is the edition. And the title is item 40. And it's entitled Physical Manifestations in Mediumship. So the phenomena of turning and talking tables. So this is our subject today. The suspension of heavy objects in the air and mediumistic writing are as ancient as the world itself. More common nowadays, they provide the key to some of the spontaneous similar phenomena to which, due to ignorance about the law that governs them, have been attributed to supernatural and miraculous characters. In other words, Alan Kardec is reminding us that table turning, moving of heavy objects, raps and the likes, which is physical manifestations, physical effects mediumship, has existed forever and did fall into the category of miracles, into the category of the supernatural. Such phenomena rest on the properties of the perispiritual fluid of either incarnate or discarnate spirits. So, of course, table turning, wrapping, movement of physical objects is not a miracle because we can explain it. As he says, these phenomena rest on the properties of the perispiritual fluid of either the incarnate spirit or the discarnate spirit. So again, we're part of the chapter of fluids. It's all in the fluids. It's really magnificent. Once we understand this, the world will change for us right in front of our eyes because we will understand the mechanisms better. And also the power of our thoughts and the power of our will, which governs all the departments of our minds. So in other words, the will is the driving force behind all of this. So now let's go to item 41. It is with the help of its perispirit that the spirit acts upon its living body. So that's really easy to understand. Excuse me. We as spirits act via our perispirit upon our living body. So this body would be nothing if it wasn't linked to my soul via the perispirit. So it is through the perispirit that this arm is moving. So, furthermore, it is with this same fluid, namely the perispirit, that it can manifest itself by acting upon inert matter. So the same mechanism that happens in our lives while we're incarnated, that we make these bodies move and do all kinds of stuff, the same mechanism is behind a table moving, a table turning, raps, noises, any of that. Okay, so the spirit acts with its perispirit upon the table, upon the chair, produces as a result either noises if it wants to, or the table to levitate or do all kinds of stuff, knocking, whatever it may be. So this is check mark number 1. So now we know it's nothing supernatural, it's just the same mechanism. It is also with the help of its perispirit that the spirit enables mediums to write, speak, or draw. So the same thing happens when a medium writes, speaks, or draws. Play music. Doesn't matter what it is. Any physical manifestation, and there's a whole chapter in the medium's book, which would be very advisable companion study, so that we bring it back into our mind, into our conscience, what actual physical effects mediumship is, because that's really what we're talking about, the physical manifestations. Since it no longer has a tangible body for acting ostensibly, whenever it wants to manifest, the spirit borrows the organs of the medium's body, which, by means of the fluidic emanation that it pours out on it, makes act as if it were in its own body. So a spirit no longer has a tangible body to perform what we're performing every single day, right at this moment, for acting ostensibly on a physical body. It does, if it doesn't have a physical body anymore, then the spirit borrows the organs of the medium's body to make it act. By means of the fluidic emanations, it pours out on it. So if I'm a medium and I start writing, what happens is that, let's say, my mentor spirit takes my hand, because the spirit doesn't have a physical hand anymore, to make it act, to make it write. And it does do that, makes my hand move and write. By means of its fluidic emanations, it pours out on the hand, on me, on my perispirit. And now the hand moves based on the will of the spirit. The same happens when the table turns. Same thing. All right, let us go. Well, we'll learn more. No worries. We're going to go deeper on this. We're just taking it step by step. So now we're moving on to item 42. It is by the same means that the spirit acts upon a table, whether to make it move without any predetermined meaning or whether to make it produce intelligent raps. The table is merely an instrument the spirit utilizes, as someone would utilize a pencil to write with. The spirit endows it with a momentary vitality, the table. The spirit endows the table, for example, with a momentary vitality by means of the fluid it injects into it. Just like a spirit injects a fluid into my hand when I'm a writing medium, it injects the fluid into the table. However, it does not become identified with it. So it's not, the table isn't the spirit, or the spirit doesn't become part of the table. So when a table starts or an object starts hurling around, that doesn't mean the spirit is hurling with the object. Okay, so it doesn't become one with it. So the spirit endows the object, like a table, with momentary vitality by means of the fluid it injects into it from its perispirit. The spirit does not become identified with the object. Persons who, in their emotion upon seeing a loved one manifest, embrace the table, perform a foolish act. So if we think this table is a loved one, when we embrace the table, the spirit isn't the table. The spirit is to the side of the table. So this is important. The same applies to those who talk directly to the table as if the spirit were contained within the wood, or as if the wood had become the spirit. All right, I think we got it. The spirit is not within the object that moves, but it's to the side. The spirit is to the side of the object, just as it would be if it were alive. When communications occur in this way, we must realize that the spirit is not within the table, but to the side. So we said that already. And just as it would be seen if at the moment it could make itself visible, just sitting right next to it, for example. The same applies to written communications. The spirit could be seen beside the medium, guiding the hand or transmitting its thought by means of a fluidic current. I'm sure some of you have seen the drawings that we get from Brazil that are linked to the André Louis books. And how often do we see mentors holding the head like this and emanating the mediums with information, with currents, so that then the medium can speak what needs to be transmitted. So it's the same with the table. All right, we're moving on. We're moving on to item 43. When the table leaves the floor and floats in the air without any point of support, the spirit does not lift it with its arms. So, as we know in apparitions, spirits, when they show themselves, they may have arms. The perispirit may have arms, but it's not those perispiritual arms that move the table. So, this is important. What it does, however, it envelops the table and injects it with a kind of fluidic atmosphere that neutralizes the effect of gravity, as the air does with balloons and kites. So we all know a balloon, we put helium in it, and all of a sudden it floats up. So when the table floats in the air, let's say, the spirit doesn't lift it and go like, ooh. No, it injects. The spirit momentarily envelops the table and injects the table with a kind of fluidic atmosphere. And as a result, it's like the helium in the balloons. And as a result, the table starts levitating. The fluid with which the table is injected momentarily gives it greater specific lightness. When it remains stuck to the floor, it is in a state like that of the pneumatic bell jar that has had a vacuum created inside it. These are only comparisons for us to show a similarity of effects and not an absolute similarity of causes, right? So it's important that we don't, like the balloon and the helium, these are just so we can imagine it better. But we don't think that the bell jar and the pneumatic bell is something that we easily can imagine because we're living in a different era. But maybe you can do it better than I. But what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the medium's book for a moment. And we're going to chapter 4, part 2, chapter 4. And we find that, I actually have a bookmark here, if you like to pull it out, because that is the exciting chapter that deals with exactly what we're studying right now in Genesis. Alan Kardec gifted us with a longer version, much more detailed version in the medium's book. You'll find it on page 103, and the chapter is chapter 4. And the title of this chapter is Explanation of the Physical Manifestations. It's super important, super interesting, and again will help us to understand the miracles later when we study them. So in lieu of reading all these pages about this subject, we're just going to pick out a few nuggets to supplement what we're saying. And some of it is the same, but it brings it in with a little bit of different words. So here, Alan Kardec is wondering, how does a spirit move a solid object? And now you can, for yourself, maybe see whether you can formulate the answer for yourself, because then you know it's not just what I'm saying, but you're actually making it your own. And that's why studying it independently would be very helpful. So how does a spirit move a solid object? It combines a portion of the universal fluid with the fluid emitted by the medium in order to move it. You see, it's a little more detailed. So how does a spirit move an object? The spirit combines a portion of the universal cosmic fluid with the fluid emitted by the medium in order to move it. So the fluid emitted by the medium is perispirit. Do spirits lift tables using their arms? And we already know the answer, which have become solidified somehow. Do spirits use their arms that have somehow become solidified to move a table? Answer is, when a table moves underneath your hands, it is because the spirit who has been evoked has taken enough of the universal cosmic fluid to infuse the table with artificial life. Having prepared the table in this way, the spirit attracts it and moves it under the influence of its own fluid, the perispiritual fluid, which it emits by exerting its own will. So the spirit uses portion of the universal cosmic fluid and injects it, envelops the table with it, and moves it closer to it. And at that moment, it now emits via its own will, its own fluid. So it's a combination. And that allows now with the will, with the intention of the spirit, to have the table do whatever it wills it to do. When the object that it wants to move is too heavy for it, it asks for the help of other spirits who possess similar characteristics. Because of its ethereal nature, the spirit in and of itself cannot act upon dense matter. We know that, right? It needs an intermediary. And the intermediary is the medium. The link is what you call the perispirit, and it provides the key to all physical spirit phenomena. So let us back up because that was a little confusing. Because of the spirit's ethereal nature, the spirit in and of itself cannot act upon dense matter without some kind of intermediary. The spirit cannot. And what is the intermediary? In this case, it's the perispirit. Without the link is what you call the perispirit, and it provides the key to all physical spirit phenomena. The fluids. The perispirit is the key, is the intermediary. Just like the perispirit is the intermediary when I lift my arm. My spirit wills to lift this arm, but my spirit couldn't act on matter directly. It needs an intermediary, and that's our fluidic body. That's the perispirit. Okay? Are all spirits able to produce phenomena of this kind, physical manifestations? And the answer is, the spirits who produce them are always less evolved. It's a spirit that is not yet entirely free of material influences. So this is interesting. Of course, by now, physical manifestations have gone on the back burner because we rather deal with more evolved spirits, right, to getting messages. So now we know the spirits who create these manifestations are of a lesser evolved nature. We can understand that highly evolved spirits do not concern themselves with matters that are well below them, but we would like to know if they would have the ability to do so. The answer is they possess mental power as the others possess physical power. So the more evolved the spirit is, the more it uses its mental powers versus its physical powers. When they have need of the latter, namely the physical power, the spirits employ those who have it. So then the more evolved spirits, if they want to manifest something physically, the so-called higher spirits that are less evolved, more capable of creating physical manifestations. Interesting, right? There's teamwork and collaboration and cooperation everywhere in the universe. All right, let us go to another question. If we correctly understand what you have said, the vital principle lies in the universal fluid. The spirit draws the semi-material envelope that comprises its perispirit from its fluid. Yes, the perispirit is drawn from the universal cosmic fluid. And it's through this fluid that it acts upon inert matter. It's through the perispiritual fluid that a spirit acts upon inert matter. Is this so? Yes, it means that the spirit animates matter with a sort of artificial life. Matter becomes infused with animal life, like the table, right? All of a sudden, the table starts moving. So the spirit animates matter with a sort of artificial life. Matter becomes infused with animal life. The table that moves under your hands is alive with animal-like life and obeys the intelligent being itself, which is what? What is the intelligent being? The spirit who wills it, the will of the spirit behind it, the intention. The spirit itself does not push the table as if it were some kind of physical load. And when the table rises into the air, the spirit is not lifting it with its arms either. We heard that before, right? Instead, the animated table obeys the impulse given to it by the spirit through infusing the table with the fluids that counteract gravity. What role does the medium play in this phenomena? Very good question. So this is what happens when the table moves. That's the mechanism, right? With the fluids. But what role is now the medium playing in all of this? I have already said that the medium's own fluid is combined with the universal fluid accumulated by the spirit. So the spirit infuses the table with its fluid, but the medium helps, consciously or unconsciously. However, you must not forget that this life is only momentary. So it's not happening forever, right? Another one, can a spirit, so the role of the medium is to support this fluidic infusion of a physical object like a table. It's doing really the same that the spirit does and facilitates and aids as a result. Can a spirit act without resorting to a medium? Okay, let's see. It can act without the medium being aware of it. In other words, many persons help spirits to produce certain phenomena without even suspecting it. This is kind of like what we hinted to before. We could be supporting these manifestations, these physical manifestations in our homes or anywhere else in a spirit center without knowing it. But it still requires a medium. These phenomena require some mediumistic activity by an incarnate, consciously or unconsciously. These persons are like fountains from which spirits draw the animal fluid they need. Consequently, the conscious participation of a medium, as you know, is not always necessary, especially with spontaneous phenomena. But then it's the unconscious mediums who help. Another question. What is the preponderant cause in the production of this phenomenon, the spirit itself or the fluid of moving tables? What is the predominant cause of the production of moving the table, the spirit or the fluid? The spirit is the cause, and the fluid is its instrument. Both are required. Makes sense, right? The effect is really the fact that the table is moving, but the cause is the spirit who decides it wants to move the table. With its will, it then combines the table with these animal fluid, with the perispiritual fluid, and then hires some medium to help fluidically as well. So the cause is the spirit, which is the intelligent principle, and that's why when Allan Kardec for the first time saw these tables moving, he said, there is no intelligence in this table. How can it be? And that's when the whole research started. And now, thanks to him, thank you, we have now the capacity to understand how that works, right? It's magical. All right, let's see, is there more? We can understand this phenomena when dealing with a hard object like a table, but how can a spirit make us hear noises or articulated sounds within the air alone? Yes, so now we talked about the movement of the table and all that, but what about noises? Well, here's the answer. Since the spirit can act upon matter, it can thus act upon air in the same way that it acts upon a table. So it doesn't matter what the subject matter, so to speak, is, whether it's air or whether it's a solid object like a table, a pen, doesn't matter what it is, the phenomena, the structure, the steps are the same. So here's the summary. When an object is moved, lifted, or thrown through the air, the spirit does not take hold of it, or lift it, or throw it, as we do with our hands. It saturates the object, so to speak, with its fluid, combined with the medium's fluid. Momentarily animated thereby, the object acts like a living being, with the difference that it does not have a will of its own, but instead obeys the impulse of the spirit's will. So, dear friends, there's a lot more in this chapter. So, this is worth gold. So, we invite you to move over to the Medium's book to get more details. There's a lot more questions that are very helpful. All right, so let us continue on with item 43. Wait, maybe we're not done with 43. There we go. So consequently, one should understand that it is no more difficult for a spirit to lift a person than for a spirit to lift a table. To carry an object from one place to another, or to throw it somewhere. All these phenomena are produced by the same law. So it doesn't matter what's being hurled, moved, where the knocking comes from, what noises we hear. The same law, the phenomena, the steps behind the phenomena, the rules, the law is the same. When the table chases someone, it is not the spirit who is running, because it can remain peacefully in the same spot. It gives impulse to the table by means of a fluidic current with the help of its will. So interesting how the will, right? And we have this beautiful chapter of the will. It's the second chapter in Thought and Life, where Emmanuel helps us brilliantly to explain the power and importance, the most important part of us, because it runs our mind. And then he further says, a boss who is the will is the boss of all the departments in our mind, needs to be educated, because the will can really create a lot of bad things, can create a lot of evil if it's not educated towards the good. So all of our education is towards the good, so that our will help us do the good, be of service, right? And educate ourselves, the two wings we need to ascend to God: education, knowledge, service, love. When raps are heard within tables or elsewhere, the spirit is not striking it with its hand or some other object. So it's not the spirit that's striking it with the hand when we hear raps. It directs a stream of fluid to the point where the noises come from. And this produces the effect of an electric jolt. The spirit can change the sound just as one can modify the sounds produced by the air. All right, so when the table chases someone, the spirit is not the one who is running. Spirit can sit peacefully in a corner or next to somewhere in the room. It just gives the impulse to the table via its fluidic current with the help of its will, and we also know with the help of a medium. Because the medium also will help with its fluid donation. All right, now let us move to our last item, which is item 44. We are on page 310 in Genesis by Allan Kardec. A highly frequent phenomena in mediumship is the ability of certain mediums to write in a language unknown to them, or to address subjects orally or by writing that are beyond its reach of their education. Now, that is something we've observed in dear Chico Xavier, right? From what we understand, he only went to elementary school, but he wrote books that are so elevated that we're hard-pressed to believe they came from his own intellect, right? So here we're talking about this. This phenomena is no more extraordinary than that of seeing children write by guiding the hand. So again, Allan Kardec educates us that people who don't have the knowledge of what they're writing is not extraordinary. One can make them write what one wants. It's just like when we have a child and we guide the hand. So we can make this child write or draw anything we want if we take the hand where the pen is. Same happens with the help of the fluids, as we just learned, when a spirit wills a medium to write. One can understand how the same would apply to mediumship if one recalls the way in which spirits communicate with mediums, who are actually for them no more than a passive instrument. If mediums possess the mechanism, if they have overcome the practical difficulties, if they're familiar with the various terms, they are in the situation of someone who knows how to read and write correctly. So the medium becomes an instrument, like a pen. And with the help of the will, the mind, the knowledge of the spirit, a medium who is not at the same level in its knowledge and education can very well write beyond its own knowledge. The aptitude of mediums for things foreign to them is also frequently connected with the knowledge they possessed in another existence, and of which their spirit has retained an intuition. That is interesting too, of course. Maybe in this lifetime the person isn't educated or even literate, but there is passive knowledge from previous incarnations. For example, if there were poets or musicians, it will be easier to assimilate the poetic or musical thought that a spirit wants them to reproduce. Languages unknown today could have been known in another existence. Hence, a greater aptitude for writing mediumistically in that language. So it is not extraordinary for mediums to write or speak messages beyond their own education. Of course, it's greatly helpful, but it also happens that there is a mismatch. And we understand the mechanism through the mechanism we just studied, how that can happen. And it can also be through the aptitude of a medium from previous incarnations, having studied certain foreign languages or studied certain subject matters, that will help the medium with a certain intuition about the language or the subject matter, whatever it is. So let us summarize real quick. So we talked today about the physical manifestations and mediumship. So this is the physical effects mediumship. It's not the intelligent effects mediumship. This is the physical. And the distinctions are in the medium's book, and we can read them in contrast to understand what the difference is. So in the physical manifestations, the spirit acts with its perispirit upon inert matter. It so-called infuses the table, for example, surrounds it, enwraps it with its perispiritual fluid. The spirit endows the object with momentary vitality by means of the fluid it injects into it. Behind it is the spirit's will. So the spirit momentarily envelops the table and injects it with a kind of fluidic atmosphere that neutralizes the effect of gravity. Now, we also further learn from the medium's book and Genesis that a medium is part and parcel of this mechanism as well. And it's the medium who donates its perispiritual fluid into the same object. And consequently, the table moves. So I hope this is really clear. Let us stop sharing. There we are. Yeah, because again, it's important because we want to understand later on when we go deeper into studying the actual examples, the miracles that Jesus performed, so-called miracles that Jesus performed, then we can take them apart and we understand, oh, wow, yeah, that's the mechanism behind it. Oh, this is why this person healed. This is the mechanism behind it, right? All right, dear friends, let us give thanks to God, to Jesus, Allan Kardec, and his diligent work, his diligent, intelligent, well organized, and clear work for us to expand our minds, to understand this world better and its mechanisms behind it, even in those subjects that were confusing for the longest time and labeled supernatural. And they are now clear to us because they're part of the law of nature. Thank you, God, for giving us this opportunity to get together in this beautiful platform of Kardec Radio, where we're nourishing our souls, expanding our minds, opening our hearts, and connect with our friends internationally, 24/7. Thank you, dear friends. Thank you so much for joining. Many hugs, much love, and so God willing, we will see you again next week, same time, same place, and we will continue in our chapter 14, Fluids. This time we will be studying the obsession and possession phenomena. And after that, we will switch chapters. We can't wait to go into the miracles. God bless you, dear friends.